You know what it is? It's video podcast time again, and we're going to do a quick run through of Adolf Hitler's consolidation of power. So this is his first 18 months in charge, looking at some of the key events and just revising some subject knowledge. So we'll just make our way around this slide, looking at some of these images and talking through some of the events. As always, consult your notes, any revision guides, check out a few videos online as well, but this is just a quick overview. So starting in the top left hand corner, of course, all of this begins with the Reichstag fire. Now Hitler became the Chancellor of Germany on the 30th of January 1933. But when he did become the Chancellor, you've got to remember that he becomes Chancellor largely because he's offered a deal by Franz von Papen and President Hindenburg. The idea being that Hitler is Chancellor with von Papen as his Vice-Chancellor, and that Hindenburg and von Papen feel that they can manipulate him and control him, get him to do what they want him to do. Hitler very quickly proves, of course, that's not the case. What he does is he calls for a new election in March of 1933. The idea being then that if he can get more support in the Reichstag, at this point he's only got just around about a third of the support, then he would have complete control and he can then start passing his own laws. This idea of complete control, over 50%, is of course known as having a majority, and Hitler did not have that at this point. Shortly before the March elections, 27th of February 1933, the Reichstag building in Berlin is set on fire. Now this deliberate act of arson is a matter of debate amongst historians. Was it Hitler and the Nazis, or, as the Nazis claimed at the time, wasn't it Marinus van der Lubbe, a Dutch communist, who was to blame? Now of course blaming van der Lubbe makes a lot of sense because the Nazis are not only just labelling what is essentially a foreigner, but also as well their biggest political enemy. And by making the communists look dangerous and aggressive and potentially almost like a terrorist group by setting fire to the Reichstag, they then feel that they can win more support from the public, reassure the public that if they're in charge and if you vote for the Nazis, you're going to get a lot more stability. Now it's a day after the fire, on 28th of February, that Hitler gets emergency powers from President Hindenburg, and he uses these powers to start looking at communists all across Germany. And they start to be thrown into the newly built concentration camps. So for instance, just outside Munich we have places like Dachau, which are built by the Nazis as prison camps at this point, not as places of execution. Now poor old Hitler, because in the election that then follows in March, Hitler only wins 44% of the vote. So he's still 7% short of the majority that he needs to have complete control. So he has to form coalitions with other nationalist right-wing parties. And Hitler, of course, is not really up for this because he wants complete and utter control in his hands, not sharing it with anybody else. So it's later on in March, on the 24th of March 1933, that the Nazis, third picture along, you can see there, actually get a piece of legislation passed which is called the Enabling Act. Now the idea behind this, of course, is that it will give Hitler complete and utter control without having to consult the Reichstag on any decisions. So hence by its name, it enables Hitler to pretty much do what he wants. Now, as a lot of you often ask in class, it doesn't mean that he can then get rid of President Hindenburg. There are certain limitations. But ultimately, from Hitler's point of view, if this law was to get passed, he would have complete control. And that's exactly what happens. It needs 2/3 of the Reichstag to vote in favour of it, and by 444 votes to 94, Hitler gets the enabling law passed in March 1933. This essentially brings an end to the Weimar Republic. It votes itself out of existence. Germany is now a dictatorship. All decisions, well, virtually all decisions, are now in Hitler's hands. So what does Hitler do? Well, he takes this opportunity to start banning various organisations. So as we just move around the slide to the bottom right hand corner, what does Hitler get rid of? Well, first of all, he gets rid of trade union movements. Trade unions are organisations that are set up to look after the rights of workers. Now, these groups are often linked to left-wing parties. So in case of Germany, Social Democrats, communist organisations. By getting rid of them, Hitler is getting the workers on his side and ensuring that workers in the future don't go on strike unnecessarily or make demands about the government in terms of wages. What he also does in July of 1933 is Hitler bans all other political parties in Germany. Now this does include organisations such as the Centre Party, who were a Catholic party who had voted alongside Hitler for the Enabling Act, and Hitler, can't be trusted of course, decides that he's going to not only just ban them, but the Communists, the Social Democrats, again reinforcing this idea of a dictatorship. Germany is now a one-party state. However, Hitler's quest for power is not quite fulfilled. In the summer of 1934, Hitler encounters a problem with his own party. This brings us on to the image on the bottom row in the middle, an event that is known as the Night of the Long Knives, where Hitler decides that there are certain elements within his own party, people such as, for instance, Ernst Röhm, the head of the SA, who are a threat. So where is this threat coming from? Well, one thing that Hitler still doesn't have control of yet is the army. Under the Weimar Constitution, the president has complete control of the armed forces. Ernst Röhm, who's been with the Nazis since the very beginning, has been a close personal friend of Hitler's, he wants a share of the power. And as we should have realised by now, this is not something that Hitler wants to do. So a plot, a rumour is concocted that Röhm is trying to merge the SA with the regular army, and that therefore he's trying to plot a coup against Hitler. Now the actual coup, in other words the removal of Hitler and putting Röhm in charge, again is a matter of debate. Röhm certainly did though want to merge the SA with the regular army. Now this would have created a force of well over 2 million men. Hitler of course wants the army on his side, because further down the line, and this of course happens in 1939, if Germany was ever to go to war, he'd want to have complete and utter support of the entire armed forces. So Hitler is quite happy that Röhm and other leaders are executed, mainly because this sends a message to the army that Hitler wants their respect and their support, but also sends an important message to the rest of Germany, but also to his own party, that Hitler is the man who's in charge here, not Röhm, not anybody else. The final step in Hitler's consolidation of power comes with the death of President Hindenburg, the man pictured in the bottom left-hand corner. Hindenburg dies in August 1934. Now Hindenburg was an old man by this stage, and his death pretty much could have come at any point. But what it does mean is that for Hitler it neatly ties up an 18-month period where he goes from being the Chancellor, with only a third of the support in the Reichstag, right the way around to a position where, once Hindenburg is dead, Hitler combines the role of Chancellor, the role of President, into this one of Führer. Now, how would you be asked about this in the exam? Well, quite often the examiner would want to either get you to explain different ways in which Hitler consolidates his power or increases his power after 1933. So in that case, you could talk about any two of the events on here. Easy ones to remember are the Enabling Act, because of the power that it gives him, but also the Reichstag fire, the Night of the Long Knives. What you might also be asked for 10 marks is to look at, is one of these particular events or factors more important than another in making Hitler the dictator of Germany? So that could be in the form of a statement. So the statement could say, the Enabling Act was the most important factor in Hitler's consolidation of power. Do you agree? And the idea is that you would look at why the Enabling Act is important, but then comparing it to other factors, so the Reichstag fire, the death of Hindenburg, the Night of the Long Knives, etc. Now, of course, what it's worth doing is asking your history teacher for some past questions connected with this, but also as well going back to your original notes, go back to your book and have a look at, is there anything on here that you need to refamiliarise yourself with? Check out some of the other videos from the Germany period, and thanks for watching.